much more disciplined than me. The truth is, I'm not. I love Cheetos. I love television. I love Netflix. I love not thinking. I like not working. So because I lack natural discipline, as an athlete, I was disciplined, but there were more disciplined guys. I like to work out, but if you said, hey, you can be jacked, sexy, ripped, live to 150 years old and not lift all this heavy stuff and eat clean, I'd probably eat the pizza and the Cheetos, right? So it's my lack of discipline that's caused me to create habits and an environment around me that supports them that allows me to get some of these things done. It's the lack of discipline, actually, in my case, that causes me to know I need these structures around me. So we're not different than you.
There's a chapter in the book called "The Secret to Self-Control." I talk about some of the studies and research around willpower and so on. And one of the key findings is that people who exhibit high willpower, who appear on the surface to have a great deal of willpower, the primary thing that is different between them and people who appear to have low levels of willpower is that they are in environments where they're tempted less. So their environment is primed for them to be high willpower. And I think that alone should inform a lot of your strategy. Again, how do we stack the deck in your favor? How do you design an environment where you don't need to be a superhero just to get something done? You know, like if you're constantly putting yourself in a tough position where you're fighting against the friction of the environment you're in, it's almost like a form of gravity. You know, it sort of pulls you toward it. The other thing that I wanted to mention that you kind of brought up, talking about like putting yourself in an exceptional environment. And actually, so we've talked about the first law, making it obvious. This actually connects directly to the second law, making it attractive. So far, we've mostly talked about physical environment, but the social environment is also crucial. And I think this is, if I could pick one topic that I think is even more important than I realized when I wrote the book, I would probably say it's this. You know, we are all part of multiple tribes. Some of those tribes are large, like what it means to be American or what it means to be French. And some of those tribes are smaller, like what it means to be a neighbor on your street, or a member of the local CrossFit gym, or a volunteer at the elementary school, or whatever. But all of those tribes, all those groups that you belong to, they have a set of shared expectations, a set of social norms for how you act in that group and the type of habits that you perform. And like if we take the neighbor on your street example, and say you walk outside on like Tuesday night and you see that your neighbor's mowing their grass or cutting their lawn, and you're like, oh, I need to mow the grass too. Well, you might stick to that habit for 20 or 30 or 40 years. Like however long you live in that house, you wish you had that level of consistency with some of your other habits. And why do you do it? Partially you do it because it feels good to have a clean lawn, but mostly it feels good to have a clean lawn because you don't want to be judged by the other people in the neighborhood for being the sloppy one. And so it's actually the social expectation of that group, of that tribe of neighbors on your street, that's kind of underlying that habit and the consistency that you have. And so the expectations of the group often influence, in a very strong way, which habits we find attractive and which ones we find unattractive, and which ones we stick to consistently and which ones we don't. And I think the practical takeaway here, the punchline is, you want to join groups where your desired behavior is the normal behavior. Because if you're surrounded by people who are doing that thing on a normal basis, it's a part of that tribe's culture or expectation, it suddenly becomes much easier for you to stick to that too. You know, you hear stories about this from entrepreneurs all the time. I have one as well, which is when I started out as an entrepreneur, I had nobody around me that was doing that. I don't have any entrepreneurs in my family. I didn't have like this, network of people who had started businesses to tap into. And so for the first 6 months, I just sent tons of emails to different people who were doing what I already wanted to do. I probably sent about 300 emails or so. Most people didn't get back to me, but maybe 30 or so did. And I set up calls with them and chatted on Skype. And then about a month later, I met 5 or 6 of them in a conference. And so now I had a group of people that were already doing the thing I wanted to do that I actually knew, that I could go to with questions, that I could look at. And they were doing these things. It wasn't weird for me to do it anymore. It wasn't weird for me to try to do this business stuff because now I had people around me. I had a tribe where the desired behavior was the normal behavior. And that made a huge difference. So social environment also is a crucial factor in habit formation.
So good, brother. I take 2 things that I want to add, and then I want to ask you something that I'm just fascinated to ask you about. But I'm enjoying this very much, by the way. Very much. I can do this all day with you. When I was 25, I paid a bunch of money to go to a seminar that I didn't have. It was like a week long. And I came back
And my dad said to me, "So what was the big takeaway from this rah-rah thing you went to?" It was like a week-long deal. And I said, "Dad, just the fact that you use these words, bro, just blows my mind, the actual word." I said, "Dad, I figured out that my life's going to be a direct reflection of the expectations of my peer group." He just sort of stared back at me real quiet, and he goes, "That's actually really good." And I said, "I actually believe that, Dad. I think my life will end up being a direct reflection of what my peer group expects of me. And I need to find the right peer groups." And pretty much the rest of my life, whatever I've wanted to go try to achieve or become or feel or experience, I've sought peer groups that expect that out of themselves and their own lives. And I think it's one of the most powerful things, what you just said, anyone has ever said on my show, and I haven't said in a very long time. The second thing I was thinking when you were talking about these environments that support our habits and our choices is that if I were a leader of any organization listening to this, if I were an entrepreneur, CEO, the leader of a division somewhere, the leader of a family, a coach, I'd be thinking about that real heavy again, evaluating that. What's the environment that I'm raising my organization in? Am I supporting, if I was leading a church or I was leading any type of a business, I think you should look at all elements of that. Or is that environment in every single way supporting your outcomes and your goals? Because the way you describe that, James, doesn't just apply to an individual, it applies to an organism or an organization as well. So I just want to make sure that I second that for those of you listening to this. There's two ways to hear this stuff. I'm hearing it from me, then I'm hearing it for the people that I try to lead and I try to support. You mentioned earlier the phone thing. And I wanted to ask you this since I read the book. And by the way, I read the book a while ago, right? And then I prepped for the interview, getting to know more, and it reminded me of things. I actually think I read the book, and then I read it again like 6 weeks later on a vacation because I thought it was that good. And I don't reread books. I bet I've reread, aside from my religious texts, 4 books in my life: Think and Grow Rich and your book, and probably 2 more that I can't recall right now. That's how much I think there's value in the book, just for at least for me and my stage. Your phone or people's phones, it's become a great pattern interrupt. It's become something that we can get into, even myself, where I wake up and I've lost an hour of my life. Is there anything you do or would recommend in your phone? What you said earlier about Audible was the only app on there that led you there. But that in and of itself, the smartphone thing gives us access to, here's what my theory on it is. I want to say it really quickly. Obviously, technology, the internet, phones, access, smartphones have allowed all of us to become far more productive. I don't even think that's arguable. But then you have to ask yourself, now you're being measured against the mean. So as cultures become more accessible information, can get things done faster. There's still a mean. There's a median of which people are productive. And so some people use their phone in a way that puts them below the average or near the average. Other people are able to navigate all those distractions and become hyper productive. So is there something you recommend with a phone or you do in your phone? What apps do you have? Do you not have? Anything like that you would share?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, smartphones are a huge part of our daily routine now. And you're right, they have strong positives, but they also can have strong negatives. A couple of little patterns I have around my phone usage. So the first one is, whenever possible, I try to leave my phone in another room until lunch each day. And that just gives me a block of time so that I can just respond to my own agenda, right, and do like a deep creative block or focus on my stuff before everybody else starts squeezing things onto my plate. And, that doesn't work for every job, and it also doesn't work for me every day, but I do it most days, and the days when I do, I almost always have a better morning. Some little interesting insight with that, by the way, just as an aside, I have a home office, so if I leave my phone in another room, it's like 45 seconds away, but I never go get it. And yet, if it's right next to me, I'm like everybody else. I check it every 3 seconds. So I'm like, well, did I run it or not? Like in one sense, I ran it bad enough to check it every 3 seconds when it was next to me. And in another sense, I never ran it so bad that I would go work 45 seconds to get it. And I think that there's a lesson in this about habit formation, which is sometimes you just need a little bit of friction to curtail the behavior to the desired degree. It's not that I never want to use my phone again. It's just that I don't want to use it all the time and let it interrupt like some of these deeper working sessions that I have. And so that 45 seconds is just enough friction to keep it in place. Something similar happens with like beer. If I get like a 6-pack of beer and I put it in the front of the fridge where I can see it like as soon as I open the door up, I'll have one every night at dinner just because it's there. But if I put it down on the lowest shelf and like tuck in the back of the fridge where I can't really see it, I got to kind of bend down to spot it. Sometimes it'll be there for weeks. I won't even remember that we bought it. And so same thing, like, did I want it or not? And so finding ways to introduce a little bit of friction to your habits, I think, can be very helpful.
Wow, that's good.
On that same note, I'll go through different periods of friction with social media. So I think there's a big discussion we could have here about social media. I don't think that most people are using it to its full power. It can be incredibly powerful. Twitter in particular is like a great source of ideas for me at this point, but it's only because I've spent a lot of time curating who I follow. And so my feed is very productive. I'm like in the flow of good ideas all the time. Mm-hmm. People don't really think about it this way, but when you choose who to follow on Twitter or Instagram or wherever, you're choosing your future thoughts. Right? Like you're choosing the flow of information that you're going to put yourself in front of. And pretty much every thought that you have is downstream from what you consume. And so it's really, if you want to have better thoughts, if you want to be a sharper thinker, it's really about making sure you're consuming better pieces of information. And so curating your feed in a careful way is a good way to do that. Now, even so, there are still periods when I spend too much time on social media. I'm working on a new book and I need to have a block of time where I'm just like not being bothered by that. So I usually fall into one of two strategies. Either I will delete the app from my phone after each time I use it. So when I get done using Twitter, I'll just delete it. And that means the next time I need to download the app again. And that's going to take a minute. And often that's enough friction for me to be like, I'm just doing this because I got 10 seconds free and I'm bored. It's not because I actually want to check it. And so I won't download it again. Occasionally I do want to download it and actually see what's going on, but a lot of the time it's just enough friction to avoid it. And then if I really get extreme, and I did this with Atomic Habits when I was working on the book, the last 9 months, I just really had to be focused and need to make sure I wasn't getting distracted. So every Monday, my assistant would log me out of Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, reset all the passwords. I would work all week, and then on Friday, she would send me the passwords so I can log in over the weekend, and then we'd get them up. And I did that for 9 months straight. So I know it worked. I got the book done, but that's a very extreme version.
No, brother, it's an extreme example, though, of the fact that you're not relying on some sort of mystical discipline to get things done in your life. And I really believe most people think high achievers are just these super crazy disciplined people. That is an extreme move. It's probably something I should have done when I was writing my book, and you would already be reading it by now. Instead of just finishing writing it. It's making me really think. I've done a much better job of managing that stuff, but I have to tell you, I think it's one of the great distractions of all time. I hadn't thought about it as in depth as you described it in terms of future thoughts, though. And again, I go back to children. We want to monitor what our children consume and what they look at. Somehow we think we can pick an age and we're immune to the things that we're watching that impact our thoughts and our feelings and our emotions and our energy. And I got to tell you, man, you're 100% right. I watch people get transformed by what they're consuming on there and become so distracted. So I'm reading an article you wrote that resonated with me. And I don't know that this gets worse as maybe you achieve more. But you're like, the ultimate productivity hack is saying no. So this isn't part of the book. This is something a little bit different, right? And I think most people have a hard time saying no. And I know I do. There's so many days now, I'm 50 years old, and I'm just being transparent with friends of mine that listen to this because I look at this is like my family, our audience. I have a lot of days, man, where I look at my calendar and I'm like, why did I agree to this? Why did I agree to this? Why couldn't I just say politely no? And I should have got to a point in my life by now where like I'm allowed to say I don't want to do that. And yet I've done that all my life. And it's been a hindrance to achievement. So talk about that a little bit. Like you want to be more productive. This article, by the way, guys Google it. It's so good. It actually teaches you how to say no as well in the article. But are you good at this or did you write it for your own benefit?
Well, pretty much everything I write is a reminder to myself of what I should be doing. So, no, it's not that I'm great at it. It's that I'm trying to learn to be better at it. I felt this very acutely after Atomic Habits came out. And over the course of the first 3 months that it was out, I was doing okay. And then the book really started to take off. And I was constantly feeling like I'm a very slow learner and that I should have been upgrading the level at which I was saying no to things. And I was always like 2 or 3 months behind. I was always on the hook for more stuff than I should have been. And it was because I was saying yes to too many things. And there's this weird dynamic where success starts to eat itself. So the thing that was getting me all of these opportunities is because I was focused and I wrote a good book. And because of that, people were very interested in talking to me or sharing these new ideas. And like, there's all these interesting new opportunities that come your way. You know, do you want to speak at this thing? Or what about these TV rights? Or how about this interesting opportunity? Or would you like to come to this, cool conference or retreat or whatever? And individually, each of them sounds really fun and interesting. But collectively, if you start to say yes to all those things, you don't have any more time to do the thing that got you those opportunities in the first place, which is thinking clearly and writing a good book. And so success like eats itself. All these new opportunities come in and they squeeze out the thing that you were good at in the first place. So it's, I don't know, the other thing that's difficult about it, and I still, I'm close enough to the beginning of my career that I can still appreciate this and feel this. For the first decade of my career, I was trying to say yes to everything. I was trying to capitalize on every opportunity so that I would have the chance now to say no to basically everything because you got a bunch of stuff coming your way. So at first it's like outbound and you're trying to like capitalize on every opportunity you can. And then there's this like rapid switch where now all of a sudden everything's inbound and you have to put up a tight filter. And that can be a difficult lesson to learn.
It's almost a book, bro. The success can eat itself. I watched it happen over and over and over to people. That the very thing that got them successful, in your case, the discipline and focus to write an incredible book, they somehow lose over time with saying yes to all of these other things that were ancillary to it at one point.
You know that quote? There's a quote from Brian Eno, he's a musician. He says, the way to get rich is to have one good idea and to never have another one. And it's like, you just keep capitalizing on that thing and you don't distract yourself. You don't keep saying yes to all this other stuff that's on the fringe. But it's easy to say, it's hard to do.
Long-term success, man, is not always easy because of things like success can't eat itself. A couple of things I want to ask you. We're going to run out of time, but I'm fascinated by your work, brother. What do you do when you're slipping? You feel yourself slipping on some of your habits? Is there something that you do immediately or that you notice? I guess even is there a part of your awareness is like, I'm more vigilant to see if I'm slipping than I used to be? What are your thoughts on that?
Mm-hmm. I do think my sense of it has improved over time. I do think I've become a little more vigilant. Maybe early on, like my early 20s, maybe I didn't realize it when it was happening. I'd be a little late. It would take a week or two before I'd see it. Now, I think I actually usually can tell within that day or the next day, like pretty quickly, if it's like, oh, you're starting to get off course, like you missed a workout or you missed a deadline with the writing this time or whatever. And what I found, it almost, it works so well for me that it's almost a crutch, which is the number one thing that will always get me back on track is to have a good workout. It will save every bad day that I have. If I feel terrible, if I'm in a bad mood, if I'm not productive, I'm not getting things done, if I go to the gym and I get one good hour in, then the whole day is kind of like rescued, and it also resets my mind. And like after a hard workout and a good night's sleep, your problems adjust to their appropriate size. It's like, it doesn't mean that it's not a problem still. It just means that you see it clearly and you understand like the scope of it and where it fits. But I say that it's almost a crutch because sometimes I know that now. And so if I'm having a bad day, I'm like, well, I just need to work out. And then I go do that. But that doesn't actually solve the underlying problem. I still haven't fixed the root cause yet. So I can't rely on that too much. But that's definitely the thing that does it best for me.
Me too. Is there something two questions left, by the way. Thank you for this. I'm enjoying it, man. We'll do something together. You're outstanding. Is there something that your top achievers do that you work with, that you talk with, that you interact with, that the people that aren't achieving at their level do? I know that's a broad question, but does something come to your mind where you go, yep, this is what they do?
Yep. Yeah, no, I'll give you two things. So first thing is we could put this different ways, but they reclaim their habits faster than most people, or they get back on track quickly. So top performers make mistakes like everybody else. But I think most of us know this or have felt this from going through life, which is it's almost never the first mistake that ruins you. It's the spiral of repeated mistakes that follows. It's like it's letting slipping up become a new habit. That is the real problem. And if you make one mistake, you miss a workout, or you miss a deadline, or you flop on a speech or a presentation, if you get back on track quickly. If the next time, the next iteration, you don't miss and you're right back where you were before, then your progress is generally maintained. And you can just continue to advance from there. But if you miss a workout, and then one missed workout becomes 2 weeks, and that becomes 2 months, well, now all of a sudden you have backslided a fair amount, and you got to regain all that ground. And so I would say, another way to think about this is like, a lot of people are focused on what can I achieve on my best day, and that's kind of how they select their habits, like what's the best thing I could do when I'm at my best. But instead, you could ask yourself, what can I stick to even on my worst day? And I think that could be your baseline. If you try to raise that baseline a little bit so that your bad days are a little bit better than they were before, then you never eat in to the compounding as much. You don't lose that progress as much. So I think that's pretty good. They respond from mistakes quickly. And then the second thing is more of a mantra or mindset, a way to think about things than a specific action. But this is a phrase that comes from Frank Slootman. He's the CEO of Snowflake, the software company. And basically it's something to the effect of narrow the focus, up the quality, increase the speed. So narrow the focus, do less. Stop trying to do so much. It's very hard to be, we could maybe even say it's impossible to be a top performer in a dozen different things. Like you have to choose what matters most. So do less, narrow the focus, up the quality. Once you have selected those few things that truly matter, do them at an exceptional degree, right? Do them in a very high level way. And then finally, increase the speed. Only once you have selected a few things to focus on and you do them at a high level, then you can worry about shipping more consistently or increasing the volume or scaling the project or whatever. And those are simple ideas, but I think that top performers take those simple ideas very seriously, and you'd be surprised how far they can take you if you do take them seriously.
So freaking good, bro. So good. All right, last question. I run into you in a Starbucks somewhere. I'm a budding new entrepreneur with some dreams. I could be 50 years old. I could be 25 years old. I said, James, just tell me where I should just give me one thing to start with. One thing that you haven't said to EdMyLETT so far in this interview that, I want to create some change. Can you give me some place to start? One thing to do, one thought to have, one action to take, whatever it might be. What would you say to them?
Well, so again, I'll say two things. The first is a piece of advice that was given to me when I was in that situation. So when I was starting out, one of the best things that somebody said to me, early on was try things until something comes easily. And I think if you break that phrase down, there are two important pieces. The first is trying things, which means you need to have a philosophy of experimentation. This is actually quite different than what a lot of people do when they start out. A lot of people feel like what they need to do is read more and research more and try to, discover everything that's out there. And it's not that you shouldn't plan. It's not that preparation isn't useful. It is useful. But at some point, planning becomes its own form of procrastination. And when that happens, it's not useful anymore. And so you have to have some willingness to experiment, to try things, to test stuff out, and see what works specifically for you. What matters most is not if it's like the best strategy that's ever been designed. What matters is, will it work for you and for your situation? And you can only figure that out by experimenting. So that's the first part. And then the second piece is until something comes easily. Now, the key distinction here is that does not mean that it is easy. Right? It doesn't mean that it's going simply or smoothly. It just means that the results are coming more easily than the other stuff that you had tried. You may still have to work very hard to get that outcome. But this, I also think, helps reveal like your strengths in the situation. So a lot of people think like your strengths are just something that like must come effortlessly to you or something. But actually, in many cases, your strength is the thing that's challenging or the suffering or the pain that you can handle better than most people. So it's not that it's not challenging for you, it's just that you seem to be able to handle that form of pain a little bit better than most people. And I think if you look at a lot of top performers, they're like that. You know, it's not that athletes aren't working hard. It's not that they're not sweating. It's not that it's not tough to be in the gym and like doing the next rep. It's just that